The text messaging part of Grower's Edge is very handy because every day I'll receive a text that shows me where the best local market is.
That's what I like about Grower's Edge too. It gives me the information I want on my smartphone so that if I'm not in the office, I still get the information that I need.
Good afternoon, welcome to GrainTV. My name is Cody Bills. Today is Tuesday, July 14th. We had the markets moving lower here today with corn futures down 13 cents on the December contract. Soybeans down 4.5 cents, and wheat in Chicago down 4 3/4 cents on that September contract. Now let's turn our attention over to the NOPA crush numbers. Those numbers are going to be coming out here on Wednesday. Keep in mind they'll be released 11 o'clock Central Standard Time. Expectations for June crush numbers for 141.478 million bushels to be crushed during the month of June. Last June, 2014, we only saw 123.117 million bushels. So if realized, those expectations of 141 million bushels crushed in the month of June, that would be the second largest June crush figures on record. So keep that in mind and make sure that you are paying close attention to the market there if you are trading soybeans or have some soybean contracts on, because oftentimes these NOPA crush numbers do add a bit of direction or a little bit of volatility to these markets. Now let's turn our attention over to the chart landscape here for corn and for soybeans. I just want to take kind of a step back, look at these weekly charts and just kind of see where we are in terms of overall chart landscape. You'll notice that over the last 3 weeks we have been able to rally very sharply. This chart is a weekly chart. Each one of these bars represents 1 week worth of price activity. So keep in mind, when you're looking at this chart, you'll notice on the very far right, we've had this rebound off the lows, and now we're trading up near 452, 440 area. Now keep in mind that back on January of 2014 and June of 2014, this was a critical support level. Now today, we were traded up, we touched on that level, and we found some resistance up there. So not only do we have some technical resistance up around those price levels, but we also have a few fundamental and storylines that are providing a little bit of a resistance or a little bit of a selling pressure story. So, and that story, what I'm talking about is, of course, for corn. You know, we had the acreage numbers come out and the quarterly grain stocks numbers come out. Quarterly grain stock showed that more grain had been used. That was on the 30th. More grain had been used than expected. Then we had the July WASDE report. Those increases in demand that we saw in the quarterly grain stocks were reflected in this July WASDE report. Analysts were also expecting to see a yield cut in that WASDE report. Now, we didn't get that yield cut, and what was interesting is we still were able to continue rallying higher. Now, analysts were really expecting that the heavy amounts of rain were going to impact the crop very negatively, and the USDA would reflect that in the July WASDE report. Now, the July report, typically you don't see major yield revisions. And so I think what we saw is traders react to the lack of revision in the yield forecast by just kind of shrugging their shoulders and saying, well, you know, we would expect to see a revision in August. And not only will we get potentially a revision in yield, but we're also going to get the resurveyed planted and harvested acreage, particularly for Missouri in the areas that were really heavily delayed in planting. And so puts a lot of emphasis on that August report, but there's a good amount of time between now and August. And with that being said, I think it put a lot of emphasis on these crop conditions, these crop progress reports, which are released out on Monday. I think a lot of people are looking for these crop progress reports to show some sort of deterioration in the crop, and we just didn't get that yesterday, particularly for corn, which was the leader to the downside today. And so without seeing any sort of deterioration in the corn crop, I think that it starts to raise some question as, will we see too much of a yield revision in August? And I think what we saw yesterday, good to excellent ratings held unchanged. Basically, what we saw is people getting a little bit nervous after 3 weeks of sharp rallying, saying, well, are we really going to have continued deterioration in the crop from here on out? Because when you look at the weather forecast, and let's just take a quick look at the 6 to 10 day weather outlook, it starts to look dry. it starts to look like it's clearing up, and we're not going to get that excessive moisture in the grain belt like what we saw. Now, keep in mind, you can get excessively dry, but right now a little bit of clarity here in the 6 to 10 day and the 8 to 14 day, a little bit of cleaning these storms up and providing a little bit of relief to Ohio and Indiana and Missouri, which have just been absolutely saturated. This isn't a bad thing. And so I guess when I look at this, I wonder, will the crop truly deteriorate here going forward? And I think there's less of a probability at this point, and that's one of the reasons why we saw some selling pressure here for corn. When you look for soybeans, it's a slightly different scenario because we still have that question mark about harvested and planted acreage in the August report, and so I still think with that question mark we could get a little bit of a risk premium. But when you look at soybeans, we did see the crop deteriorate 1% in the good to excellent category yesterday. That was in line with analyst expectations, and I think one of the reasons why we ended up kind of hanging in there and not really having any sort of significant selling pressure. Also keep in mind, when you look at this weekly soybean chart, you'll notice we moved up to the highs up there. And those highs are really the same highs that we've observed in October, November, and December. October, November, December, we were bumping our head on that 1032 resistance level over and over again. It was a very strong resistance level. Now we're back up right around that price area, and it seems as though we're just kind of chopping around and definitely finding some resistance up there. So keep that in mind when you're out there and you are when you're looking at these and you're making your hedging decisions. Both corn and soybeans both kind of at critical junctures here where there is resistance. You'll notice on that daily corn chart, we'll pull that back up. That daily corn chart, we're right near that 100 period moving average on the weekly chart. And with that being said, we're kind of right around that area where we could just find ourselves consolidating here for the next couple of weeks, trying to find a little bit of direction. So I would say for producers out there, it's important to try and make sure that you have a strategy in place to protect yourselves to any sort of downside. If we start to clear up here and we get just adequate amounts of moisture going through the rest of the growing season, I really think that we could start to see prices start to move down, to kind of trickle and cut back over toward the lows. However, if we start to turn dry, that could be a huge game changer with a lot of shallow rooted corn. So these are all things that we're going to have to pay attention to. This is all weather dependent, but considering right now where we're standing and really what the weather is looking like over the next 8 to 10 days, I would say that there is a possibility that these technical resistance levels and the fundamentals here and the weather outlook could all play a role in having a little bit of a pullback from the nice gains that we've had here over the last 3 weeks. Other than that, guys, thanks a lot for tuning in. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, please give the office a call. The number is 877-472-4607. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and take a demo of our 14-day free trial. See what it's like to have live quotes in the palm of your hand and also on your desktop. We'll look forward to seeing you. We'll talk to you here Wednesday. We're going to have the ethanol numbers out. We're also going to have the NOPA crush number. So it's going to be a big day here tomorrow. Stay tuned. We'll see you then.